Hello, BookTube, and welcome to Epic Comic Book Wednesday. This is an ongoing feature where Michael K. Vaughan and I combine the forces of stately Vaughan Manor and Hyde Cottage to talk about the comic books on which we have wasted our youths. And sometimes, as some of you bloodthirsty little wombats eagerly await, we will also disagree because we don't agree on everything. And I originally horned my way in on this. This was originally a feature on Michael's channel where he was going through not all of comics, but just his Epic collections, which is a paperback run of full-color reprints that Marvel has done to great success. Fans love the Epic collections that differ from their hardcover reprint line, the Marvel Masterwork series, in that the Epic collections are not chronological. The Marvel Masterwork series is slowly galumphing its way, 8 or 9 issues at a time, through the entire run chronologically of all of their back comics. And they're not jumping around. Whereas the Epic collection does jump around. Not only infamously with the numbers printed on the actual covers, but also with the stuff that's being reprinted. So if you're doing, let's say, for instance, an X-Men, let's say you decide you're gonna start making X-Men Epic volumes, it might very well be that you would kick that off with the Dark Phoenix saga, rather than with the first 10 or 20 issues of the X-Men's own book. That you would jump decades ahead and reprint that instead, and so on and so forth with all the different properties. And that, I'm sure, was designed on one level in some soulless corporate meeting to help with promotional material. If you've got a new movie coming out about so-and-so or whoever, and they're very late in your chronology, you don't want to be bound by chronology. You want to be able to reprint a volume that's $40 right then and there. But also, I think it probably had to do, on the creative side, with facilitating throwing a spotlight on runs, which Michael and I have talked about in Epic Comic Book Wednesday many times, which is that when you've got a title going on, just making its monthly deadlines, etc., and then suddenly a synergy will develop between the artist and the writer. Or maybe the artist will take over the writing chores so that there is necessarily synergy. Or there'll be some great inspired idea for a story that will just suddenly lift the run of some particular comic out of its normal rut. Suddenly fans won't be able to talk about it enough, and suddenly it'll be a benchmark. So that they'll look at, the Defenders or the Avengers or whatever, and they'll say, well, these issues are good, but they're no X. And there'll be a large amount of fan unanimity as to the success of a particular run. It's not just Marvel, of course. It's true for DC Comics as well, the home of real superheroes. And it's not predictable. You can get a dream team on a title, and it still won't be a run. And I think that on some level, at some creative meeting, people were saying, well, if we made a situation like the Epic collections, we could highlight runs. We could highlight really strong periods on any title. I'm not sure that either of those meetings took place, but that is the fun of dealing with Epic collection. Now, Michael and I have wandered all over creation for comics, and I hope we do. I hope we continue to do that. Needless to say, an Epic Comic Book Wednesday series that only dealt with Marvel's Epic collection would never allow us to talk about the real superheroes, the ones that don't need psychotherapy. The DC superheroes, Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, Superboy, the Legion of Superheroes, the Green Lantern Corps. Instead, if we just dealt with Epic collections, we would be stuck in Freud's backyard, in the heroes with feet of clay company that Stan Lee created and then shepherded to a multi-trillion-dollar product. We range all around, but for today, we are going back to our roots, to Marvel Epic collection. And actually, because Michael has pointed this out many times, Marvel's reprint culture is so much better than DC's. I hate to say that, but it's true. That we could easily do a new Epic collection every week. We would never run out of material. It's not like an Epic collection is a rare thing. I think there were 2 this week. Today is New Comic Book Day. I think 2 come out today. But we're going back to our roots this time around. We're talking about an Epic collection, and it is very recent. It just recently came out. This is the 8th Epic collection of the Fantastic Four. And a nice big fat thing. This was, what? $45. But for that, you get all color reprints, and also the Epic collections are usually very generous with the extra material that they reprint in the back. which is really kind of nice because a lot of times, like Foom, Friends of Old Marvel, was kind of a parody magazine that Marvel did for fans. The original print issues of these sorts of things are now collectible. And they're never going to be reprinted. You'll never see them anywhere else. So a lot of these things are chosen with care, and they're things that you won't have seen. Like, for instance, okay, I don't know what this is doing in here since it's not reprinted in this volume. But that is it's called a pinup. But that's actually the cover to one of my single favorite issues of the Fantastic Four. We'll get to it in due time, I'm sure. I don't think it's been in an Epic collection, but this also, these back of the book features also give something that I just love. I'm pretty sure that Michael is enough of a comic book nerd so that he just loves it too. I love seeing reprinted house ads. Once upon a time, at the bottom of the letters page or some page full of paid ads, you would get an advertisement, just a house ad hawking some of the latest things that Marvel is doing. And those don't show up anywhere. So it's wonderful to have them. It's wonderful to have them in a book. The only thing that the Epic collections don't do, and the Marvel Masterworks volumes don't do them either, but the gigantic Marvel hardcover omnibus editions, the $150 omnibus editions, like Michael has 10,000 of them. I think I could swear Marvel made a $200 hardcover omnibus of ROM Space Knight. They probably thought, well, no one's going to buy this. It's legendarily one of the worst comics ever made. I'm sure that somebody at that meeting said, oh, it's a guy at a manor. He seems to buy any old crap we show. But those big omnibus editions tend to have something that both the Masterworks and the Epic collections don't have, which is the original letters. They just reprint everything. They reprint the house ads and the original letters pages. Needless to say, I am all over those letters pages, so those are always a treat. And as far as I know, DC Comics has nothing like that. Nothing that's whole hog. Nothing that's. I mean, the Marvel omnibus editions are beautiful, even with the dust jackets off. They're just lots of loving care are put into them, and typically speaking, lots of loving care are put into the Epic collections as well, but not always. Not always. This, for instance, is a mysterious Epic collection. This is an Epic collection in which virtually nothing is done right. Yes, you get those very interesting back features, and yes, the coloring here is just wonderful. If anything, it's improved from the paperbacks, from the ordinary issues. But other than that, the problems start literally right away. Literally right away. If you are not actually currently in the 1970s, what are you going to make of this cover? I know what this building is, but do you? Did you pay your $2.50 to go and see it? No. Do you remember it? No. Does it get mentioned in your history books? No. So you're going to wonder what's going on there. Well, it looks like a normal city, but what's this? Well, okay, if you study these issues, they're from the 1970s, an era when mysteriously, Michael K. Vaughan, I'll leave a link to his video down below, mysteriously he says that it was a bad decade for hair. I don't know what 1970s he's remembering. in all other decades of human existence, hair, when it dreams at night, dreams of dying and going to a heaven in which it looks like it did in the 1970s. Before Ronald Reagan came to power and the crew cuts became mandatory again. But that's number one, is that you don't know what this is. I do. If you look it up in your history books, you'll see it. I went and saw it in person. Then thing number two is, is that the Fantastic Four? I mean, their name is big as life on the cover, and that looks like that's the Thing. I see the Human Torch and Mr. Fantastic, but who's that? That's not Sue Storm. That's not Mrs. Richards. That's not the Invisible Woman. Instead, there's this chick here with the chain and the lightning bolts on her slacks. But there's one other problem. Those things, I guess, aren't really problems. Maybe. I mean, it's the duty of a cover to intrigue you. But okay, the title of the volume is Annihilus Revealed. Where is he revealed? On I-95? is he driving on the the Manhattan Freeway there? Is he maybe in one of these high rises in the background? Because he sure as hell isn't anywhere else on this cover. And this isn't the first time that we've seen an epic collection that looked like it was slapped together without any care for details. Why is this called Annihilus Revealed? And if you're going to call it Annihilus Revealed, why do you have this cover? The cover is an indication, anyway, maybe accidentally, maybe on purpose, for all I know, of a little theme that runs through these issues, which is what used to be called, what was called in my day, women's lib, the women's liberation movement, which merely wanted equal treatment under the law for half the population. It wasn't a liberation in the strictest sense, but nevertheless, when these comics came out in half the states in America, a woman couldn't have a bank account under her own name. She couldn't have a credit card under her own name. She needed to have the name of a husband and was expected to be a quasi-child of his, certainly an unpaid servant of his. And that's reflected in these issues. At the beginning of throughout these issues, Reed Richards and his wife, who's not on the front cover, and she's not on the back cover either. Once again, we still have Medusa. That is Medusa, an Inhuman. We'll get to her. In these issues, Reed Richards and his wife have issues. They start to fight. They have a child. They have a little boy named Franklin, and Reed seems to think that it's Sue's position in life to take care of Franklin and to stay out of trouble. She has to constantly remind him that she's a member of the team, in addition to being a mother, and that she's his equal. And that doesn't sit well with him. So even before the crisis in this issue, they're still not speaking to each other. They're not really living together. It's put a strain on the team. And her absence is one of the reasons, the technical reasons anyway, why Medusa, who is unofficial queen of the Inhumans, a race of superpowered beings that live in a secluded kingdom in the Himalayas in this part of the Marvel mythos, it's one of the reasons why Medusa has suddenly become part of the team. She thinks it might be fun to go adventuring outside her kingdom and have adventures with the Fantastic Four, so that they stay the Fantastic Four instead of becoming the Fantastic Three. But that she is involved because of a storyline here where Johnny Storm, the Human Torch, is broken up from his girlfriend, Crystal, who is, in the course of this one volume, as always, referred to either as Medusa's cousin or Medusa's sister. No Marvel writer seems to be able to keep that consistent. Johnny is in love with Crystal, but she can't live in the outside world. She's not conditioned for the atmospheric conditions in the outside world. It seems like it would kill her the longer she stays. So she has to go back home and live under the reign of her silent king, Black Bolt, with the Inhumans. And Johnny Storm, at one point in this collection of issues, decides, well, if she can't live in my world, maybe I can live in hers, and goes to Atalan, to the home of the Inhumans, and encounters a whole big storyline there that is eventually resolved. It's great. John Buscema artwork. He does most of the artwork throughout these issues. There, I see is Black Bolt. Some of his artwork throughout here, he's inked by Joe Sinnott, who is his best inker, with an artist like Buscema is a very, what's a good word for it? He's a very controlled, very classical artist. He gets his lines very fine, very neat. Has a very dynamic sense of movement from panel to panel. He's not a rough artist at all. So if you give him a rough inker, if you give him Tom Palmer, for instance, or Vince Colletta, worst of all, if you give him a rough inker, an inker who is going to increase the roughness of the renderings in order to make them seem atmospheric or textured, they're going to ruin Buscema's artwork. I don't know why Marvel Comics, for a long stretch on my beloved Thor, John Buscema was inked by Vince Colletta, which is the worst collaborate. Maybe it was just that Colletta was the only person who was available, but Vinny Colletta is not the person to do that. Whereas Joe Sinnott is perfect for the job, just perfect. You get a classic panel, and Sinnott will just render it perfectly, and you get that all throughout here. I mean, look at this here. This is the evil, frightful four break into the Baxter Building, and Buscema is wise enough to give us a big splash panel as they stand in awe of Reed Richards. Riches is their captive now, but they can't help but stand in awe. The rest of them don't really care, but the wingless wizard is an inventor and a scientist on his own, and he's stunned. It's a great panel. It's a great artistic moment. You'll get that with Buscema. Uh, the reason we get the Frightful Four at the beginning is because the character on the cover here is named Thundra. And she's from an alternate world, a world in which women are completely scornful of men and view them as a pathetic, weaker species that must be dominated and domineered at all times. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, does that mean that Thundra comes from Twitter? No, she doesn't come from Twitter or from modern day academia. Instead, she's a femizon. And she's not only a femizon, but their Wonder Woman. She's a superpowered femizon who comes to our world with the sole intention of humiliating one of the strongest men in our world. Who she sets her sights on the Thing, on Benjamin J. Grimm, the ever-loving blue-eyed Thing, the idol o' millions. It's kind of odd, the way she's written. Roy Thomas writes her as someone who won't raise a hand against a woman because she considers them her sisters, and who thinks that men are the weaker sex and somewhat pathetic. And yet her goal in coming to our world is to seek out the strongest man and beat the crap out of him. So in this run, Thundra is, abusive. Imagine if there were a superhero, or we're supposed to like Thundra. She's not a villain. Imagine if a superhero were introduced and his code name was the Wife Beater, and it wasn't because of what he wore. It's because he refused to lift his hand against male villains, but he loved to smack the crap out of female villains. You wouldn't be sympathetic, and yet, according to the twisted logic of Thundra's origin, that is what's going on here. I have no idea why the Thing is hooked onto the railing there, and I have no idea what's keeping her up. It looks like the next second after this panel, Thundra and the Thing will fall 175 feet to concrete. After which, who knows what will happen? I don't know. But a plot line develops when Johnny Storm is in the city of the Inhumans. I want to show you some of the artwork because it is absolutely gorgeous. Look at what he does. Look at that. That is just amazing. You won't get this kind of rapid perspective change with Jack Kirby, the other legendary Fantastic Four artist at this time. You simply won't get it. Buscema goes from long panels like that, fast action, to Kirby-esque set pieces, and he does it so easily. It's just a joy to watch. It's a joy to look at the sheer dynamics of his panels. Just amazing. It helps to blunt the impact of the storyline in the secret world of the Inhumans, where they are putting down a rebellion from beings called the Alpha Primitives, who are slaves. They are the slaves of the Inhumans. They were bred by the Inhumans to be slaves. These are supposed to be the good guys. And they're constantly putting down rebellions from the Alpha Primitives. But there's a big shock awaiting Johnny Storm in the world of the Inhumans. Because he does eventually get there, and he does eventually meet Crystal. There she is, traveling with her dog, Lockjaw. One of the Inhumans is a dog who can transport. When Johnny Storm gets to the city of the Inhumans, he finds that Crystal is in love with someone else. And it's not just some schmo from Atalan. It's a figure we already know. It's Pietro Maximoff, the super fast Avenger known as Quicksilver, who apparently, in a neat little bit of continuity wonkery, which Roy Thomas, the writer of this issue, absolutely loves to do that sort of thing, he found a place where he could insert a little retconning and has Crystal rescue Quicksilver and nurse him back to health. There she is with Medusa in their kingdom, and when she nurses him back to health, they fall in love. He's in love with her the minute that he lays eyes on her. Literally, the minute that he lays eyes on her, he falls in love with her. Now, any psychoanalyst will tell you that that is obviously faulty. That's obviously flawed. It's not real. It's a heightened. There's actually a term for it it's escaping my mind, but it's the kind of heightened emotion that you get in an emergency of caretaking and crisis. It's not real love, obviously, but nevertheless, Crystal decides that she wants to that she has made her decision between Johnny Storm and Quicksilver, and she wants to stay with Quicksilver in her Forbidden City. She can't come to the normal world anyway without risking her health. So they walk off together, and we get this close up of Johnny Storm, and he's got tears in his eyes. Ben Grimm asks him if he might like to take in The Godfather again. Keep in mind that is not a Blu-ray. that is not a home entertainment system. That means you want to go to the movies and see The Godfather, which was playing at the time. These issues are absolutely full of topical references to All in the Family or Hee Haw or pollution, air pollution, or The Godfather or whatnot. Quite different from the topical allusions that you get in current day Marvel Comics, which are all to food. It's all the only thing that the characters think about or talk about or do is eat food and then talk about what they're eating. So I guess you'll learn what Starbucks has going on in a new Marvel Comics. But it's in this issue when the latest slave uprising is violently put down by the Inhumans. Go figure. That Medusa decides to become a Fantastic Four member. And Johnny Storm changes his costume to an all-red costume, as he puts it. When I was a kid, I always wanted to be the original Human Torch, the one I read about in those second-hand comic books, which might be true now. But at the very beginning of this collection, we get a really good issue. This one. This cover. John Buscema doing a modern-day update of the cover of Fantastic Four #1. And it relates their origin story, which we've already gone over on this channel. We don't need to do that again. It relates their origin story, where Ben Grimm becomes the Thing. Reed Richards learns that he can stretch. And Johnny Storm blasts into the air as the Human Torch. And Roy Thomas makes sure to add a mention of that original Human Torch. He says, "Now I know why I've been feeling so warm. Look at me. All I did was get excited. My whole body's starting to catch fire. I'm like that old-time comic book hero, the Human Torch. I'm lighter than air. I can even fly." There was no mention of the original Human Torch in that first issue. That's just Roy Thomas doing his thing with continuity. We get this. So we get the Human Torch has his red costume, which he has for a few issues. Medusa joins the team for a few issues. This is memorable. These little details of this run are memorable, but they raise as many questions as they answer. For one, obviously, you must be asking it now too. Even if you don't know these comics, you must be wondering, well, if Crystal can't spend any time in the normal world, then how can Medusa? And I don't have an answer for you. I don't have an answer for you at all. I really like her time on the team. She becomes invested in the personalities and the personal troubles of the team. She holds her own. There's one sequence. I don't know if how easily I'll be able to get to it, but I remember when I read it, I bought these issues just for Buscema's artwork and nothing else. There really isn't anything else to do. We'll get to that. It's, I think, later in this run, but not a couple of issues in this collection are drawn by people who are not John Buscema. Rich Buckler is in here doing his Jack Kirby impersonations, mostly taken from Thor rather than from the Fantastic Four. And Ross Andrews in here disastrously. He's just not cut out to draw the Fantastic Four. But it's mostly Buscema. Yes, here we go. At one point, a battle is raging there. You see Medusa. Look at that beautiful artwork and the coloring too. The colorist is not really credited in these issues. It was Glynis Wayne. She's not really credited in most of these. And at one point, some of the bad guys start approaching Medusa, and she says, "At last. For a time, I thought the men would have all the excitement. I'm tired of being moral support." Then we get these top 3 panels here, which just blew me away back in the 70s. After all, a woman can enjoy a fight as much as a man, especially when that woman is Medusa. And she's fighting these people and also enjoying herself. which, is usually not given to the women in Marvel Comics. At one point, I'll never be able to find it, but at one point in these issues, she says that she's outnumbered 20-1, so the odds are in her favor. That sort of thing. Of course, a couple of times in the issues reprinted here, she also states in the middle of battle that she was born with the ability to control her marvelous hair, prompting at least one irate letter to the editor saying that, of course, that isn't true. The Inhumans are not born with superpowers. They get their superpowers from the Terrigen Mists in a special ceremony, and not all of them do. And they don't know what those powers are going to be. They're individual to each Inhuman. It's not like you could breed someone to have Medusa's hair and have only one person who had that outcome. Medusa also holds her own here because there's a fact about her marvelous prehensile hair that wasn't really articulated. In fact, I'm sure that Roy Thomas and Jerry Conway had no idea about it when they were writing these issues. They just took the character as they'd seen her and maybe upped her just a little. It wasn't until the publication of the greatest book in the history of humankind, I of course refer to the official handbook of the Marvel Universe, Deluxe Edition, that we learned that Medusa's not actually moving her hair with the muscles of her scalp. She's telekinetically moving her hair. It's the only thing she can telekinetically move, but she can move it and extend it, and also because she's moving it with her mind, it's superpowered. She can lift things with her hair that she can't lift with her arms. Boulders, for instance, in the issues here. But that's one of the questions that is just never addressed here, is how Medusa can be part of this team if Crystal can't. The whole plotline was kicked off by the fact that the Human Torch wants Crystal on the team. The whole reason that Crystal ever left the team, she shows up on the team when Kirby and Stan Lee are still writing and drawing this. And the whole reason that she leaves is because she can't handle the atmosphere in our polluted world. Medusa seems to be able to do that. Of course, the other question is, she's the consort of the king of the Inhumans. What's she doing taking off on an adventure spree with a bunch of costumed people in the outside world? What does Black Bolt think about this, for instance? It lasts a while. I was all in favor of it. If anything, like a lot of people who wrote into the Fantastic Four at the time, I wanted it more. Let's show more of what it's like. This is great. This is fantastic. No one objected at all, especially since Sue Richards is not written out of the plot. Instead, she's given a prominent spot. It's just her subplots have to do mostly with her son Franklin, and with one incredibly pivotal issue that has a terrible cover. I want to show you this. That is the cover of Fantastic Four 141. John Romita Sr., of course, did his inkings on this thing. He did as much as he could, but there's only so much you can do. This is the issue that brings to a head the arguments between Mr. and Mrs. Richards in these issues. But before we get to that, I want to show you. This is a John Buscema cover where the Fantastic Four fights a whole bunch of juvenile delinquents. They also fight a gigantic furry monster with Sputnik on its head. Don't believe me, there it is. That's also a John Buscema cover, and there's something you're going to start to notice about these John Buscema covers. Let me get you another one, although there's only one exception to the rule. Here's another one. The one thing you'll notice about these Buscema covers, something I've mentioned about him in the past, he can't do them. His covers are typically terrible. Silver Surfer #4 notwithstanding. His covers are usually terrible. This one has, what is that? That's a panel from a comic book. That's not a cover. I mean, first of all, the Human Torch doesn't fly sitting down. And look at all the action that's going on here. Look at all the dialogue. What are we supposed to pay attention to? God only knows. I have no idea. Let me get you another one, just to show you that I'm not picking favorites. There, look at that. That's a terrible cover. Look at all the stuff that's going on there without any focus at all. I mean, this giant monster has Crystal in its grasp, but she's off in the background. That's Ross Andrew, mind you, but still, you get the point. This particular run on the Fantastic Four has just lousy covers. Here's a John Buscema cover where the Thundra and Medusa are fighting over the thing, and he's crying, it looks like. while his teammates look on. Which, the reason that I bring this up is not to bash on John Buscema, it's just to point out another instance where I think this epic volume was poorly designed. First of all, I don't call it Annihilus Revealed. He's in 2 issues out of this whole thing. He doesn't recur throughout here. This volume belongs to Thundra. So call it after that if you're going to do it, if you're going to do that at all. But the only effective John Buscema cover, the only effective cover in this whole run, is his remake of Fantastic Four #1. So make that the cover. It's still got way too many words on it, but make that the cover rather than this. And certainly, if you're going to go with this cover, use Thundra in the title. Don't mention Annihilus when he's not on the cover and barely in the thing. But getting back to Fantastic Four 141, here they are squaring off against Annihilus, who is literally a bug-eyed alien from the negative zone. In these issues, for the first time, we really get a fleshed out version of his origin. It's not much. It's not much to write home about. And we also get Agatha Harkness, who you will know from, some of you, those of you who aren't comic book fans will know her from the wretched Scarlet Witch TV show, where the villain of the piece ends up being Agatha Harkness. But John Buscema had a great time drawing her, both here and in Sal Buscema in the Avengers. Look at that panel. That's just amazing. Look at that. There's a lightning bolt striking in the background. The stereotypical visual iconography of an old witch, complete with a black cat. That is just beautiful. It's just beautiful, and the coloring does it justice. But at the conclusion of this issue, after the team has defeated Annihilus in a fairly routine thing, Franklin Richards, the little boy, Franklin Richards' weird mutant powers that are always undefined start to cascade out of control. That was Annihilus' plan, and even though Annihilus is defeated, that is still happening. And at the last minute, Reed Richards has to grab an experimental device and zap his own son, making him, as Sue Richards says, a vegetable. He blasts his son while his son is in his mother's arms with a weapon that he calls experimental and defective. Because he says he has no choice. I had to do it, Sue. He was becoming too powerful. I wish there'd been another way. She says, what happened to him? What have you done, Reed? And he says, his mind. I've shut down his mind. And they're all disgusted, except Medusa, who seems, considering her track record with the Alpha Primitives, maybe she thinks that's no big deal. Maybe that happens all the time with the Inhumans. But the rest of the team is disgusted with him. We get it very explicitly in the first panel of the next issue, which is not drawn by John Buscema. It's drawn by Rich Buckler, but it's still heavily inked by Joe Sinnott, so it there's a deal of continuity. Where we get the same panel, only it's from Rich Buckler's point of view, and the Thing's dialogue on this first splash panel is even more pointed than it was in the end panel of the last issue. He says, we stuck with you through a lot of bad times, Richards. We would have followed you anywhere, done anything you asked, because we believed in you. But when a man does what you just did to your own kid, mister, that's the bottom line. The end of the Fantastic Four. That is the sort of personal highlight of this issue, and it is not resolved here. It starts there, but it doesn't. The resolution comes down the line. So it's not in this volume. And other than that, this is all just the Fantastic Four toing and froing. With bad covers, lots and lots of hammy overwriting, no real important personal developments. Do we really care that Johnny Storm changed his hair? Medusa comes to the team but doesn't leave. Reed Richards lobotomizes his son, but then it's left hanging. Which brings us to the last problem that I have with this epic collection. Apart from the weird choice for cover, apart from the weird choice for title, which is why this exists at all. This flies in the face of the organizing principle of the whole epic collection line. This is not a good run on the Fantastic Four. They fight a furry giant monster with Sputnik for a head, for Pete's sake. They fight a couple of third-rate villains. The Mole Man returns here. Miracle Man returns here. It's got gorgeous artwork, almost for the whole of its length. Uh, but it it flits all around. This is not what a great run on a comic is. I guess the Epic Collection can't always do that, but I kind of wish they would. I mean, for just collecting the next 20 issues of the Fantastic Four, we have the Marvel Masterworks line. There's nothing to unify this volume. There's no Fantastic Four fan who would ever look at this period in the title and say, "Yeah, that was a highlight." I mean, Michael K. Vaughan says that this volume is awesome, but he's a fanboy, especially a Marvel fanboy. I've been working on it, but he doesn't seem to have fallen under the allure of the Legion. And I admit there are awesome parts in here, but but they're scattered all over, and they're not unified in any way that would accompany a run, that would be a run on an issue. The Fantastic Four doesn't have a great run at this time until I think maybe a year and a half, 2 years after the issues included here. As I know well, I have these issues in the closet right behind me in my long boxes. I bought them as they were coming out. I wasn't about to give up on the Fantastic Four. I bought them. I was momentarily intrigued. I was intrigued enough to keep buying by the addition of Medusa to the team. That was kind of fun. It didn't make any sense to me why it would happen, how it could happen. None of it made any sense to me, but I liked the change of pace. But that's not the point of these issues at all. So I bought them, but I was not loving them in a way that at this exact same time, I was, of course, loving Superman and Action Comics and World's Finest. Of course, I was loving the Justice League. Of course, I was loving the Legion of Superheroes. Of course, I was loving all the real comic books. But I also, at this time in Marvel, Conan was great. The Avengers were great. Thor was fantastic, just no pun intended, fantastic at this time. But these are filler. This is a filler period of the Fantastic Four, so I'm not 100% sure why it got an Epic collection. I guess I'm glad to have it. I mean, I don't have gigantic omnibuses of the Fantastic Four. Michael would know better than I, but I'm pretty sure that the giant omnibus editions of the Fantastic Four haven't reached this era. Which means my only alternative would be the Marvel Masterworks volume or the individual issues that I have in my closet. So I'm glad to have this. There's plenty in here to recommend. It just seems odd to me. I want my Epic collections to be epic. And maybe that's a naive thing. This one certainly isn't. So that's your very long Epic Comic Book Wednesday video. Sorry about the length of this, the two of you who watch these. I'll leave a link to Michael's video down below, and maybe I'll have a more epic reading experience next week. I'm the one who horned my way in on his epic feature, so he does the driving. He picks what we're going to do from week to week. Maybe next week will be something I'll be singing its praises. I know a lot of you out there would rather that it's something that I hate, so that we can fight with each other. We'll see. Either way, we'll reconvene then. Thank you, BookTube.